Time, I'll call the meeting to order. Start with a roll call.
All right, Tom Dester.
Here.
Scott Holick.
Here.
Roger Lang.
Here.
Renee Davis.
Here.
Ken Houston.
Here.
Wes Lowry.
Here.
Kevin Bowden.
Here.
Hope Bartlett. Here. Chris Hubbard.
Here.
Price Hadley.
Here.
Heather McIntyre is here. We have Councilmember Martin here. And then we have some special guests with us.
Why don't we start with the new member,
Alrighty.
Dan Wolf.
I'm Dan Woodford.
Does anybody not know Dan? Tom, do you know him?
Yes.
We met. Renee, you know him, don't you?
Yeah, we spoke.
And congratulations on coming back to
Thank
work for Longmont.
Yes.
At a reduced compensation.
Yeah.
Slightly.
Thank you.
You're free, Dan. Well, welcome anyway.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Any comments?
No, I'm good.
All right, good. You
Got a
smiled
couple
at us.
extras over here. Yeah, are the
Sorry.
public invited to be heard? No, we have a couple extra members though. We have Deb.
Yes,
Right.
I'm Hummel with the Watershed Center.
Okay.
And I'm Yana Zerber with the Watershed Center.
Okay, great.
Anybody else need to be recognized? Let's go to approval of previous month's meeting minutes. Anybody have any questions or comments about last month's minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the May 15th meeting minutes.
Second, is there a second?
I second.
All right, thanks, Renee. Those all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, no? All right, good. All right, Kevin, you in the water status report?
Sure. Yeah, the flow this morning at Lyons was 526 CFS. The historic average is 464 CFS. Currently, it's a free river both on the St. Vrain and on the South Platte. The Ralph Bryce is full at 6,400 foot elevation with 16,197 acre feet in storage. Union Reservoir is just about full as well, and currently the elevation is at 27.5, which is 12,438 acre feet. So basically, all the reservoirs are basically pretty full.
So, I would assume we're still getting a fair amount of runoff into those. Remain full for a while, you think?
Yeah.
Any questions for Kevin? Very good.
I have a question, so
Yes.
they run out as fast as, we're not in danger of overspilling them or having them overflow their banks instead of spilling?
Not right now. We had some issues earlier with Lake McIntosh's outlet, but that's been corrected. And we're currently right where we should be on the reservoirs.
Because the rivers are up to the edges or over the banks a little.
Right, yeah, so all the ditches are shut off essentially, so there's not a whole lot of water going back into them, so. Can't fill them any fuller.
All right, I think we have some folks invited to be heard. Ken, are you gonna
Yes,
handle that?
I would like to introduce our special presentations today. We wanted to focus a little bit today on forest stewardship and a lot of the activities. The last couple of years, we've just ramped up considerably what's going on with management of the forest in the foothills west of Longmont, both regional scale, county, St. Vrain watershed scale, as well as Button Rock Preserve itself. So we wanted to present both of those. So vast watershed center basically is taking the watershed scale look at forest stewardship, and it's been extremely helpful. Kind of the cog that's helping bring together U.S. Forest Service, City of Longmont, Boulder County, private landowners. I mean, it's extremely difficult to get all the entities and do cross-jurisdictional projects. The Watershed Center has really been helping there. So I'd like to introduce Deb Hummel with the Watershed Center and let her give you a quick presentation on what's going on specifically with what we call the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership. Did I say that right?
You did.
I hope I did. I'll let Deb talk about that, and then Price will follow up with what's going on with, and you're welcome to sit in my chair or stand up until you prefer.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I don't think I see some familiar faces, but I'm a program manager for the Watershed Center, and thanks for the intro. I'm here to talk about some of our recent updates, kind of formulating in 2019, but our work that's been going on starting in 2022 and now this year, what we're really focusing on, thinking about the watershed scale, the St. Vrain watershed and county. For those that haven't met us at the Watershed Center, we are a stakeholder-driven nonprofit watershed group. We've been around since the early 2000s, and we are situated to think about long-term responses to some of the problems and issues we face in our watershed. So we began, again, in the early 2000s thinking about mine reclamation. We have floods in 2013 and fires. Kind of really thinking about the 2020 fire season and recovery, and also planning for the next fire. And a lot of the work we do is through the lens of resilience, the environmental scale, watershed scale, thinking about the ecology and restoration, and also for communities and incorporating community values in all the work we do. Our work happens under 4 main programs. Our forests and river programs are thinking about collaborative and integrating science in forestry and river projects. And but certainly we recognize that those 2 systems are very deeply connected in our watersheds. And we bridge that by, again, bringing in the best available science and collaboration and community into the planning and management that we do for these different focus areas. This is a wonderful illustration just demonstrating the diversity from headwaters to plains of the diverse ecosystems, communities, ecosystem values and practices, from agriculture to mining history, and all the values we try and incorporate in our projects. And as Ken mentioned, we really try to play that cog in bringing in all these interdisciplinary values and bring them all together in the projects that we're working on across jurisdictional boundaries and thinking about the landscape scale. So I'll talk first about the forestry work and the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership. And this image was developed by 200 plus stakeholders that participate in the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership, thinking about existing conditions, and then we're going to walk through the images that represent what we're trying to achieve as a collaborative and the different landscape scale projects we're shooting for. So this image might be a familiar sight to most of you, having very dense shady forests existing in Boulder County and in our watersheds, brought by past land management and climate conditions. Leaving our watersheds prone to high severity fire that can get into the canopies of our trees and result in complete mortality of the dense vegetation, leaving the ground prone to erosion with soils that repel water in the immediate years after high severity fire. We saw just that in the Calwood fire. After 2020, this is a photo from some of our monitoring transects collecting data on the years post-fire. So having impacts not only to the land that was burned itself and the homes and communities in that area, but also at a watershed scale, the impacts to our rivers and waterways and all the water infrastructure that we have. So with that in mind, and knowing the risk we have, and what we've experienced in recent history, this is our image of what we're trying, an iteration of what we might be trying to achieve with the collaborative of the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership So a forest that looks more natural and prone to fire, that can experience fire and have less severe risk. Wildlife that's adapted to these forest types, an open canopy, meadows, and again, providing and sustaining clean and quality water through our waterways downstream. And one day, accommodating fire, whether natural or using fire as a tool to maintain and manage our forests as they naturally would sustain fire. And so some of the highlights, recent highlights, working with the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership, again, collaborative of 200 plus stakeholders, the city, the county, communities, private landowners, and organizations. The Watershed Center has played a coordinating role of that group. And we've refined the focus area map, integrating community values. So this is the Boulder County Fireshed Focus Areas, which is a larger collaborative. And the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership, through our work with our community outreach, integrated a lot of more information on the private lands and stitching together private land opportunity where there are communities or landowners that are interested in fire mitigation, and how we can connect that to county, city, federal, public lands. And so these are the priority areas and where we have opportunity to kind of put together pieces of the puzzle for landscape scale, forest planning, and restoration. Of course, you're all familiar with the COSWAP funds, but the Watershed Center was a part of securing that funding for forest restoration and planning. And we supported the Forest Service NEPA process in their forestry planning, and again, integrating community input and making sure that those communities that would be impacted at the watershed scale were aware and able to participate in that process.
Yeah.
Yes.
One second, go back that slide.
Can I just really quick?
Sorry, is it possible?
Oh, yes, got it.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, you don't really need a slide, but it's nice how the areas selected on the southern end of Boulder County are within county boundaries, but clearly in the northern section, there's some that go into Larimer County. Are you guys coordinating in some fashion or have some collaboration with Larimer County agencies also?
Yeah, we are. So we're coordinating with, there's a few target communities that we're participating with in those areas, and then we're coordinating with the Larimer County and the Larimer Conservation District.
And are they the ones that are kind of spearheading that for that particular jurisdiction? I mean, they don't have a watershed center, right? So
Yeah,
I'm just curious who the agents are in other surrounding communities that have some ability to do what you all do.
Yeah, so there are similar kind of stakeholder-led collaborative groups up there that are working in a similar way as we are to participate in coordinated forest restoration planning. And then, where those boundaries overlap, we can help, across those boundaries. So yeah, we're still kind of sorting out
Sure.
how that all works, but we're definitely in touch and kind of planning together.
And so two other components that have also supported the Forest Health Partnership through community. Watershed Center spearheading a lot of the outreach and tools for a community to understand the goals, incorporate their own priorities into the planning. Held over 9 different community meetings in those priority and beyond areas to understand what the private land opportunities could be. And other outreach events. And then through our science work, we've expanded our adaptive management process, so the collaborative science and planning to understand where our opportunities are, where the need is, and also developed the science team, which is an arm of the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership, developed guidance for forest restoration that can help guide project managers that are implementing projects and kind of have a shared approach and able to have shared goals and monitoring metrics that they might be trying to achieve in different projects based on the area. And so this year, we're kind of transitioning from a lot of information gathering into planning and project implementation as a partnership. And so that's really honing in and identifying and prioritizing the projects within those focus areas on that focus area map. Continued engagement, workshops, panels, and tours, landowner outreach, especially in these project areas where we will be developing plans or scoping areas that might be interested in forest planning. Continuing to support the NEPA process. A project that's underway, the Watershed Center is coordinating the Jamestown project, which is over 40 different private home properties where we're implementing forest fire mitigation and home hardening protection and also source water protection. James Creek being one of the rivers of the headwaters of the St. Vrain. And I wanted to focus in on some updates on our planning effort, where we're aiming to develop plans for 500 to 1,000 acres of private lands that complement and connect or fill in the gaps of the larger planning efforts by our public land managers. These areas, resulting in again up to 1,000 acres of planning, were informed by those community meetings where we learned about landowners interested or groups and communities interested in multi-property plans and projects. Our key areas that we're focusing on in this effort this year are along the peak-to-peak priority corridor. So that was really a high priority area identified to kind of capture the impacts of a fire that might be happening in the upper watershed. Raymond Riverside, which is shown one of the plans here, Conifer Hill, Bunce Hill Road, Tahosa Valley, and the communities north of Lyons. And so we're underway with developing those plans and again, complementing work that's going on. So in this example at Raymond Riverside, off the map to the left here is a lot of historic U.S. Forest Service restoration. And so again, trying to connect those pieces with private lands to make the cross-boundary landscape scale.
Just a quick question. What percent of the area is private? Do you have any idea?
Within the
Forest area, so to speak? Is it a small, very small percentage, or
Question, I think it is a small percentage.
10% or?
Yeah,
more?
yeah, but I don't have the exact.
Okay. That's what I thought.
So that's where we're at with our planning. And I wanted to quickly talk about, I know we want to focus on forest, but with our river program and where we're headed with that, thinking about forest planning, areas that might not be feasible to restore or do any work at all, but knowing there's still risk, and how we can address those risks in our river corridors where we have room to accommodate the impacts of a future fire and flooding events thereafter. And so what we're focusing on in our rivers is restoring sediment catchment zones or large depositional pockets that in a future flood or post-fire scenario, we might have room for sediment to deposit, flooding flows to spread out over a broader floodplain. And these areas are in the transition zones of our watershed where we're focusing our planning and project implementation. So kind of similarly with the peak-to-peak corridor for forests, there's the transition zone from headwaters into the glacial valleys of that where peak-to-peak is located. And then we also have the transition zone between our canyon streams out into the high plains. And so the stars here, kind of green, represent some of the forest projects going on, and there's of course more than those. And then thinking about how these blue stars, these priority areas for rivers, can complement or fill in the gaps where forest work might not be feasible as an outcome of this large-scale planning effort. And so just a quick example or visual of what these projects could look like. This is more of a traditional approach here, where there's a single thread or maybe a side channel with a pretty gradual floodplain. Whereas these types of projects, we implemented one in the foothills of Left Hand Creek, where we are incorporating multi-threaded channels, diversity of habitat features, and in this case, off-channel pond or beaver dam analogs and other off-channel features, again, to provide the floodplain roughness and an area for the river to move and a flood event to spread out and deposit sediment before heading downstream and impacting downstream communities and water infrastructure. So that's my overview. I just wanted to mention that planning effort for identifying these projects, we're hoping to use Wildfire Ready watershed funds to really push forward our project implementation and planning for identifying more areas in the watershed alongside all this forest planning, and to again have projects that can complement each other or fill in the gaps with our rivers and forests. And with that, thank you to the city for being excellent partners and collaborators on all the work that we're doing and that I highlighted today, and I'll take any questions.
Questions, anyone? I've got one. Would you consider the forest healthy or not healthy?
So I think that first image of the shady, dense forest you could call unhealthy or just far off from where it should be naturally, because we haven't had fire on our landscape in an area where we should expect it every 30 years. Our forests now are diverted far from what they naturally look like, where there'd be open meadows and open canopies. So unhealthy maybe meaning at high risk of having severe damage and impacts in a fire situation.
Is forest thinning at all? Is that part of anybody's project to thin the forest?
There's all the mechanical work would be thinning the forest, and there's guidance on what the ideal metrics you're trying to achieve, and of course that's impacted by what kind of slope you're working on or what the opportunities you might have to really get in there and do that mechanical work. But I'm sure Price can talk more about that exact work that's happening in Button Rock too.
I'm just curious.
Sure.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Cool, thank you. So again, my name is Price Hadley. I'm the Senior Watershed Ranger up at Button Rock Preserve. I've met all of you at some point in some context. As a Watershed Ranger, I wear many hats: recreation management, public safety, emergency response, operator of Button Rock Dam. And, but first and foremost is that protection of our drinking water source at Ralph Price Reservoir, which is how all of our forest stewardship work ties into our mission here at the city. Obviously appreciate the choir coming to Water Board, talking about our mountain watershed, but just quick 30,000 foot overview of kind of set some context. Button Rock Preserve is home to our primary drinking water source for Longmont. It's a 3,000 acre approximately forested watershed preserve surrounding Ralph Price Reservoir and Button Rock Dam that hounds the water. It's on the North St. Vrain Creek in the Lower Montane north of Lyons. It has 16,197 acre feet. As we heard in the water status report, we are spilling currently, so we are holding that much water. On an average year, 65% of our drinking water storage for the city of Longmont since the 1960s. And as Deb did a really great job of setting in context, for this watershed is at high risk of wildfire. The area between Allen's Park and Lyons is perhaps, and I guess from my perspective, the largest unburned intact section of Boulder County left after large fires from the 1980s through 2020s. The Coal Creek area has a pretty large swath, but really it's that area between Allen's Park and Lyons that is, for good reason, the focal point of the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership. One of the focus areas that Deb showed on her map, and for City of Longmont, one of our key concerns as it holds a large piece of our infrastructure and highly valuable raw water source. So looking at the Colorado State Forest Service, who we consult with on virtually everything we do up there regarding forests. Ralph Price Reservoir, for whatever reason, on the USGS GIS layers, it always comes up as Button Rock Reservoir, the appropriate name for that. Looking at the risk viewer that the state manages, this area is at high risk. Moderate is the lowest we really bottom out at in areas that have been heavily treated or been burned in the past, but generally our watershed is at high to highest risk on the state's risk viewer. When you look at the probability of a burn, they look at, I think, possible emission sources, amount of development in the area, things like that. The risk is high, the probability is moderate to high in the general Button Rock area. And if there is a fire, and it's really the risk and the intensity that I pay attention to as someone in charge of helping protect this place, the fire intensity is the highest intensity. So really maxing out the scale on potential flame lengths, 150 feet plus, it's a very, very high intensity fire were it to burn through our mountain watershed. City of Longmont obviously takes managing and protecting our raw water very seriously. Since 2001, we've been engaged in forest stewardship work formally at Button Rock Preserve. I'm sure Ken could provide some history on things predating the formal forest stewardship program. But since 2001, we've been actively treating acreage around Ralph Price Reservoir with the 3 goals of watershed protection, and along with that is infrastructure protection, ecological health, so improving, restoring habitat, protecting existing habitat, and wildfire risk reduction to our water and to our human values here, recreation, clean drinking water, and community safety of surrounding communities and neighborhoods that are in the area. All of the work that we do up there is informed by our 2017 Forest Stewardship Plan that was drafted in close coordination with the Colorado State Forest Service. It lines out best management practices, established pretty comprehensive baseline forest health data for the stands in Button Rock Preserve's boundaries, and laid out treatment prescriptions based on these best management practices. So basically what is prescribed to do to these stands to make them more resilient to fire and healthier in terms of habitat. It laid out priorities based on kind of individual units drawn onto the map of Button Rock, and we've really taken and run with that since 2017. This is my standing presentation, so I have a slide in here about kind of how all this ties into climate resiliency, since it is, we have our kind of principles and goals lined out by the city. But really, the big picture is we have unnaturally dense forests due to historic land management and very effective suppression of fire, while at the same time having, due to the impacts of climate change, drier fuel, so drier timber, drier understory vegetation, reduced snowpack, more sporadic rain events, things like that, that can lead to more severe fire behavior. So again, since 2001, we've been treating forests up there. We've treated about a third of the preserve. We've leveraged a large amount of grant money to date. We've leveraged, I believe, $1.4 million, including this year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. That said, we have the potential, we've recognized the potential for increasing the effectiveness of this program and bringing it in line with kind of the most current best practices. And that's kind of alluded to that with us scaling up our work up there. We want to make sure that we are thinking on a landscape scale, working with our neighboring agencies, because fire doesn't recognize arbitrary human boundaries drawn on a map, unfortunately. And what we want to avoid is working with blinders on, or working on a small scale that ultimately is ineffective when the fire comes through, and then we are tasked with dealing with all the impacts of sedimentation on our watershed infrastructure. So I was kind of asked to give an update to the board on current projects. We have a lot going on this year. In the past, we would be very happy if we treated 20 to 40 acres. This year, we're on track to treat over 240 acres. We've got multiple projects ongoing at Button Rock that are leveraging a variety of grant funding sources as well as water utility dollars. The first and oldest project that is ongoing is the Antelope Park project that began as a conversation between Ken and David Bell and our counterparts at Boulder County Parks and Open Space about how do we work across boundaries. We have a large boundary with Hall Ranch, which is managed by Boulder County Parks and Open Space. How do we work across these jurisdictional lines? It took us a couple of years to be able to pull this off, and the pandemic didn't help. But through intergovernmental agreements, through a joint RFP, we were able to make this a reality. Antelope Park is funded through a FIRWORM grant, as well as water utility dollars that we wrote in 2020, was awarded in 2021, and we're leveraging it this year. It's a cross-boundary project. It entails 20 acres on our Hall Ranch boundary down here in yellow in the Sleepy Lion Trail area, working on preserving this meadow complex. That's great for fire suppression, great for habitat. We want to make sure that it doesn't get overgrown. And then also 22 acres on the north shore of Ralph Price Reservoir, focusing on places where we could get sedimentation post-fire into our water storage. Current status is complete on both units. Both of these were machine treatments, so machinery thinning trees that were marked by staff and Colorado State Forest Service foresters in line with a document called GTR 373, which is very, not the most engaging, but very important white paper written by numerous stakeholders, focusing specifically on the northern Front Range ponderosa forests and looking at how do we restore them to a more resilient structure. We're going to be hauling off logs pending good weather conditions, and the wood from the Antelope Park project will be distributed as free firewood. The logs from other projects will be sent to the St. Vrain Storage Yard at Oakmont Airport and used as biomass fuel for Boulder County's Open Space and Transportation Complex and the county jail. So we're finding good public benefit from these forest products. And we're already in restoration mode. This morning I was up there with Boulder County Youth Corps working on restoration of the forest floor in the Antelope Park area near Sleepy Lion Trail. So we're already bumping along to that despite 16 or 17 days of machine shutdowns this year because of our incredibly wet weather. We've worked really closely with the Watershed Center to do an outreach and education campaign to our visitors, help educate them on the value of forestry to watershed protection and community safety. We've represented Longmont at community meetings in Lyons, had multiple stakeholder field trips as recently as this Friday. We've had interpretive signage along Sleepy Lion Trail and elsewhere in the preserve for over a year. Had Ranger Talks Trailhead pop-up event recently with Maria from the Watershed Center, and a story map that Deb referred to. So obviously a lot of people hold Button Rock near and dear to their hearts for recreational reasons. We want to help them to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And I would say overall our feedback has been very, very positive. Very few critical conversations, and we always lean into those critical conversations when we can have them, and they generally turn out on a positive note. Another large project that we've got going on, which is fully funded by COSWAP, Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program Landscape Resilience Investment Grant, that was awarded to Boulder County, administered by Boulder County. The City of Longmont was one of the partners in that. We are getting a little bit more than half of the money from that $1 million grant. It's a 132 acre treatment on Cook Mountain, which is our westernmost boundary between us and Folsom Gulch on the U.S. Forest Service. It's focused on reducing wildfire risk and improving forest health. It is a machine treatment. We've repaired roads out to the unit, and cutting is in progress now. We marked all this last year and through the winter to get ready, make sure that we were able to get the ground running this season. And what we're looking at with this is, in addition to improving forest health, building a ridgeline shaded fuel break between us and the National Forest. The Johnny Park area has heavy recreation, dispersed camping, backcountry camping, and recreational shooting. I personally worked a fire up there in 2021. I would say that is one of the most likely ignition points for our watershed, and especially in fall and wind-driven fires. So that's an area that we want to help build a buffer against.
So you're out there with chainsaw, or who's doing this kind of?
Yep, so we've got multiple projects going on under the umbrella of CoSwap. Not all of it is funded by CoSwap because we have some furlong money that we're leveraging too. But what we were able to achieve through working in Boulder County is economy of scale. It's a very tight labor market. There's a lot of money being poured into, a lot of grant money being poured into forest health. What we were able to do by going in with them, so they wanted to treat East and West Hall Ranch units on Hall Ranch, which is funded by CoSwap. We did one RFP, so we weren't competing against each other, and we got one very reputable contractor who had a good track record in the Northern Front Range, and more specifically in Boulder County. So Market Forestry is our contractor that's doing these 3 treatments at Button Rock.
Both Longmont and Boulder County are utilizing all the lumber involved, any selling to private individuals?
There's no real market value for this wood. We're cutting predominantly small diameter wood trees. There might be instances of cutting larger trees in order to preserve clumps and stands of older growth trees. But those would be the exception. So as opposed to like logging, commercial logging, where you're kind of cutting the opposite end of the age class, we're cutting the small trees. So the best use that we could find for it was the biomass. And Boulder County is paying the hauling cost from North Shore and Cook Mountain because they're using that for their fuel. The firewood from Antelope Park is going to be distributed for free for like the cost of our reservation, reserving time to access a firewood deck to the public. So low cost or free. So those are our CoSwap projects. We also have another CoSwap grant that I wrote personally and was awarded this year. It's a CoSwap Workforce Development Grant. CoSwap is all stimulus dollars that were taken by the state of Colorado and put to best use as a response to the fires that we've been seeing over the last couple of fire seasons. Workforce Development Grant specifically is a no dollar grant, so the money is paid directly to the entity that we're partnered with, which is Lambert County Conservation Corps. They are an AmeriCorps affiliated group that professionally trains and certifies 21 to 25-year-olds as sawyers and gives them an entry point into a natural resource career. Diverse group of folks coming from mostly Colorado, but our crew has people from all corners of the United States, which is pretty cool and more typical of AmeriCorps. They have 4 small treatment units at Button Rock. They're focused on protecting Ralph Price Reservoir and our infrastructure and our fire egresses in the event of a fire so we can get in and out safely. They started with some defensible space work at the control house at Button Rock Dam, and they completed that. And now we're doing a second entry at Mullen Park in the interior of the preserve. And then I've marked 2 more units with the State Forest Service for them to treat on either side of the ranger station. And we've been working with the utility company to be 2 steps ahead of us, clearing any trees near the utility lines. So we have those corridors nice and clear, and the youth corps, or the conservation corps, can work on the trees without any danger from the power lines. Other projects, I also wrote and secured a program capacity grant that's going to allow us to purchase some specialized forestry equipment that will improve our capacity to do kind of multiple entry or maintenance forestry work in-house. We're buying a specific logging attachment for our skid steer and a wood chipper. It will dramatically improve our cost effectiveness of doing this type of work. Currently, I'm having to rent some of this equipment, which is very expensive at an hourly or weekly rate. And historically, we've had a really limited ability to remove wood from the preserve, which is kind of the whole point if you're trying to remove fuel from the landscape, which has left a number of log decks just scattered across the preserve that are pots of fuel that I'm concerned about. This will allow us to extract that, bring it to somebody that can use it, primarily free firewood distribution, and allow us to work more closely with private property boundaries where there's less sensitivity about slash treatment. So all the branches that are left behind after cutting, we're able to chip that. Generally speaking, we're always preparing for that next fire.
Is that a standard practice to be chipping that slash, or?
Next to private property?
Well, I mean, on city property, are you
Yes, I'd say
mulching
that
that now, or
historically,
doing slash piles and doing
So,
burn piles, or? how
we're
are
kind
you
of doing all the above. Currently, we've got 3 good options for dealing with slash. Building burn piles, which we are doing. That's really, and we'll talk a little bit about that if I still have time, but that's really the only scalable method for dealing with slash. Mastication, which is basically using a large attachment on a skid steer to chip wood, for the lack of a better term. It's not quite the same as wood chipping, and then broadcast chipping to a certain depth. The drawbacks of chipping or mastication is you're leaving a certain amount of fuel on the ground, which has impacts for firefighting, for restoration of the forest floor, and also the residency time of that heat during a fire on the soil, which can have some sedimentation issues if you're not managing it appropriately. So there's kind of a different tool for different jobs, best tool for different jobs, and we're trying to equip ourselves to have all options. Our ranger staff are all trained and certified as wildland firefighters. We participate in prescribed fire in town. We've done initial attack, meaning first people on scene on 2 fires in the last 3 years. We've evacuated Button Rock twice for fires in the last 3 years. We maintain a high level of readiness and have improved our equipment up there to respond and really nip small fires in the bud before they can grow and cause an impact to our watershed. And we're also working on hardening our structures against fires. On the long term, we're looking at how do we most effectively leverage grant dollars, how do we improve or increase the acreage treated per year, and how do we partner with organizations like Boulder County. Boulder County Sheriff's Office has its own fire management team, their own fire department that serves all of Boulder County Parks and Open Space, tens of thousands of acres in Boulder County. How do we leverage that expertise to assist us with things like pile burning? How do we leverage that to write an emergency action plan specifically for Button Rock? And how do we take advantage of Boulder County's interest in installing a wildfire detection camera at the preserve? All of those things are very possible, and we're working on intergovernmental agreements to make it a possibility at Button Rock. I touched on this, but slash treatment, pile burning is our most cost-effective and scalable option for dealing with slash. It's the only way to remove fuel from the landscape and have a true impact on the severity of fire as it moves through Button Rock. We have 300 plus existing piles at Button Rock. It's also $700 to $1,000 cheaper per acre to build piles, and in some areas it is literally the only option. Button Rock is very steep topography. We have cliff bands, steep canyons, steep slopes. We're going to work in that terrain. You can't get in there with traditional forestry equipment like chippers to be able to work. So we're looking at opportunities to partner with the Sheriff's Office that manages all pile burning on county open space, and looking at how we could function under their leadership to safely and responsibly take care of these piles midwinter. Just want to point out, I mentioned that we have been very effective at leveraging grants. From 2004 to 2021, we leveraged $600,000 in grants. We've secured over $800,000 this year. That gets us gives us the option to use some of that funding through 2027. We've also increased our acreage plan for treatment this year up to 240 plus acres. We're looking at the cost to the city, the net cost to the city. it's pretty cool to see how much we're able to leverage those grant dollars, dollar to dollar from utility dollars to grant dollars. So we're sitting at over nearly $1.5 million leverage from primarily state funding sources. And most of that is this year. Questions?
I hate that, well, and especially if Heather's gone. Can you return to one of the slides from
Yeah.
before? So it's like way at the beginning, actually. It's the one that was basically all red because it's like
Yeah.
major. Yeah, there you go. So, and there was a similar one about severity, et cetera, but this is fine. Actually, maybe we can go back to the previous one. So, actually, let's see. There you go. Okay. So, is the lighter coloration like a moderate risk, for example? It seemed like that kind of coincided with some of the landscape that was under our jurisdiction, like part of the preserve, for example.
Mhm.
Or so do you see, for example, the projects that we have pursued in the last 10, 15, 20 years or something show up as greater as a kind of mitigating factor on this particular stream?
Based on what I'm seeing here, I'd say yes. I know that, so we're currently working in this area, so that should further reduce risk, but it's a second entry to an area that was treated probably about 15 years ago. This area is also south facing, generally prone to less dense forests. However, because of our land management practices, that doesn't always hold. But we're working to take advantage of this lower risk. It's also more operable. This area on the North Shore, so most of what you're seeing here, this is all within our jurisdiction, minus some private landed holdings up there on the north side of the reservoir. On the south side, in the north-facing terrain, steep, basically inoperable terrain, which is part of the reason that it's such high risk.
Yeah.
But I would say yes, and if we're able to function at a higher scale, like a greater scale in terms of acres treated, we should have more discernible impact on the wildfire risk that we experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so past projects tend to show up as being improved or lesser risk, I guess.
That's
And
what I
and you
would,
would anticipate in
Yeah.
the future that these current projects should show up as improved.
and that also depends on how granular the State Forest Service data is, since they're looking at the entire state when they're calculating this.
Yeah,
But if it's
pixel
fine enough, it
heights are
should.
pretty-
Yeah.
pretty significant. So, and then lastly, and I don't mean to kind
No, it's fine.
of disrupt things here, but does this, do you, like, I didn't
When I
realize
lived
that
here,
this would be-
literally all the time.
Yeah.
I lived up in Long Park, up in here,
Yeah.
as a resident ranger at Bound Rock, absolutely. It's one
Yeah.
reason that my wife and I don't live there anymore.
Fair
But it's something, literally, this is my job, is solving this problem of how do we deal with and mitigate risk to our watershed. We're really lucky to have our headwaters being Raccoon National Park flow through a research natural area in the national forest and come down into a nature reserve. So the risk from development and recreation, because we've been diligent in limiting recreation impacts, is low. But the risk, on the other hand, from fire is very high.
I think we, like in meetings like this, we tend to focus so much on the projects that are ongoing. And it's a good, in a presentation like this, is a good opportunity to recognize, have that aha moment that, holy cow, there's still a lot to do, right? I guess.
And the work is never done.
And the work's never done.
What we're aiming to do is to make the workload more sustainable by cutting more aggressively. So our return intervals are 15 years, going back to a unit and doing maintenance treatments, kind of coming in and cutting regenerative growth, looking at what is necessary to improve the health of a stand, as opposed to doing small couple acre treatments that ultimately don't have any impact on the fire as you do.
Anybody else? Yeah.
And again, following up with what Deb said about the cyclical prescribed, or not necessarily prescribed fire, the historic cyclical fires, is the city playing or working with or county, Forest Service to implement putting fire on the ground, small scale, to kind of regenerate that cycle?
What we're looking at now is dealing with the problem at hand, or the challenge at hand, which would be the piles. Removing that fuel from the landscape in the safest manner that we can manage, which is, in my mind, partnering with the sheriff's office that is already doing that work. Riverside Open Space, Hall Ranch, Billings Open Space, all the county land that at least on 3 sides surrounds our reservoir. They're already working in that terrain and at that elevation, and are experts at it. So taking advantage of their skill set to do that. Broadcast fire would be a larger question. Boulder County managing their open space is one thing, us managing our watershed with our objectives in mind is a little bit different, but kind of need a starting point, and pile burning is kind of that tool that kind of has limited us in the past that we're going to be looking to reintroduce. Anything else? Thank you
Okay,
for
well,
your time.
Thank you. Okay. Appreciate the information. Do we have any agenda revisions? Okay, in the development activity, West,
Yeah, so there's one development activity in front of you, one for action. That is 150 Francis Street annexation, 2.26 acre parcel, no historic water rights, but there is an existing 3/4 inch residential city water tap. So the credit for that tap will be applied to the lot being served, instead of further subdividing flow of the property. So right now, they're presently in compliance with the raw water requirement policy, and this particular project is the concept plan describes about 14 residential lots that they'll develop on the east side of Francis Street. But one of the main reasons they're annexing at this point in time, even though they have treated water service, they really need to connect to the city's sewer water service. And we don't provide extraterritorial sewer water service, we need annex to get that service. So that's kind of the main purpose for annexing, but nonetheless, they're in compliance now.
How or when did they get extraterritorial water service? How did that, what were the circumstances that arose?
You know, I didn't go back and do the research other than to find that when they received the TAF, they didn't provide any, there's no documentation providing water or paying for that. So our policy speaks to how to calculate that. It's based on the last 5 years of use. And so their last 5 years of use, there's 2 structures on there now, a house and I don't know what it is. And that total use on that, this 2 point some odd acres is just under 3/4 of an acre of water per year. And so, yeah, it's each outside water tap is different. This is an area that's been surrounded by development for quite a while now. But I don't know the exact date of the water tap.
It's just interesting that it avoided the annexation for so long, but it's right there for it all.
Yeah, we've had a number of different donut holes and donut, and that's what this is one of them.
Heather, could you slide one up or down with that?
So I had a question about the calculation, can you walk me through that again, for the tap credit? So you use the last 5 years annual use?
And we take the average, the sum of that divided by 5, get the average annual.
Okay.
And that's so the idea is that's what they've been paying for and been using.
As a ratepayer?
Yep.
Okay.
And so that's the credit that they would receive, and that credit shall not exceed 2 acre foot in total, and it'll be applied specifically to the lot being served by the tap.
Okay, so you don't use their previous tap fee? Okay.
Now that, do they need to provide, get water from us through the annexation?
not an annexation, I mean, they're already receiving water service, and they have been for a number of years. And the only requirement in annexation is transfer of historical water rights, and they have no historical water rights. They only have the existing water tap.
So cost for annexation on their part is minimal.
Yes, that's correct.
And really the long-term basis for having a policy is that they really won't use any more water. They have an outside water tap, they're using water, city water. They won't use any more water once they annex versus before they annex, unless they further develop or subdivide or do additional work. So basically they'll come in and nothing will change in the water use through the tap. Usually it's a farmhouse these become a little more complicated now. They're smaller lots. And typically you had a larger parcel property with a small farmhouse. And they used to like to carve off a lot around that farmhouse and sell all the rest of the land for development. So that small lot that the farmhouse uses the same amount of water, as long as they don't do any additional development or create any additional demand. That's really the reason behind giving them a credit.
Is there a developer involved in this yet?
I know that the owner/developer is out of state. But I don't know if they have, I think again, their purpose is they have a failing septic. They've got to get sanitary sewer. And the only way you're gonna get sanitary sewer connection with Longmont stands. So I don't know what their timing is for their plans for further development.
Once they are in the developmental stage, depending on what their needs water-wise are, then
They'll come back to the water board with a subdivision plat of whatever size. It could be anywhere from the full 2+ acres or just a part of it. And then at that time, they'll have to meet the full deficits related to this annexation. And that'll be 3 acre-foot per acre less the credit received for this outside water.
any other questions for Wes? Is there a motion to approve this measure?
Also move, Mr. Chair.
Any discussion? Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passed. Thanks, Wes. Okay, the next item, general business. Wes has offered any information about cash and lieu, which we should be pretty familiar with by now, and I'll let you, anything you want to add to this, Wes?
Unfortunately, we were expecting to have some sales data for the parent project, Windy Gap, that Platte River Power Authority has put up the market. We don't have that at this time. I think they have an RFP put out for operating to sell up to 5 units, something like that. Hoping to have that, and anticipating having that information in September. So that'll be, once that information has become available, that's gonna be a big driver on this. Then on the other part of it, just the Windy Gap firming project cost. Again, we're still waiting for some of the refined numbers to come through. So unfortunately, there's no other information to give the board to suggest any change for cash and lieu at this time.
For that project, you know, I mean, you're not really gonna be able to put the final cap on the money amount until construction is done, so unless I see it differently.
No, that's absolutely correct, until final change orders are gonna come in at the end of the project. We do know there were some additional costs because of the federal lawsuit. We know there are some additional documented change order requests that are being put together now. Northern's kind of unofficially informed us that they were gonna do a comprehensive evaluation of those costs by August. And I hope by August means we'll have it in time for September water with me. You know, we do know it's gonna be, right now, we know it's around $50 million range. One month's portion. We just a portion of that. We know that is coming. I think waiting for the more official numbers in August make a lot of sense. And any cost, we expect late 2024, some large shot to come up with that money, because there's sufficient money already in the project right now to cover any costs. But we know that's coming, so I think we'll have a good conversation about it probably by September. Is it time to, even though the project's not done, is it time to start accounting for those costs that we know are there? That additional costs in the future should be, I think that once we're pretty sure what those costs are, we should be including in the cash flow calculation. So I think there's a comment that,
If we don't do that, are we not gonna have few opportunities left to charge a higher fee than we?
That's also true, yeah, as annexations come, we'll be charging it the current rate. We don't have any, I'm not aware of any less right away that I see over the summer, not much, but, yeah, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, something should be coming up with, Smyrna area soon. Not over the summer, but soon.
Okay, any questions for us? Dan?
I'd ask staff, how frequent do you try to update the cash flow? Is it an annual basis, every 3 years, or, again, depending upon development pressure, how often do you typically do an update for the cash?
So the policy speaks to that it's reviewed at least quarterly. So every 3 months.
Oh,
we
okay.
Look at it.
Anybody else? All right, thanks, Mark. I think we're up to you, Hope. You're on.
Cool. I'll pass this around. Hi, everybody. I was supposed to give this to you last month, but alas, I'm here today. Just wanted to give you a quick update on our water conservation programs from 2022. All right, so here's just a graph of our annual metered water consumption in millions of gallons. This line going across the top is the total treated water production, so our wastewater treatment, or our water treatment plant effluent. And then it's broken down into all of our different customer classes. And the handout that I'm passing out reflects very similar data, so, but I'm happy to answer any questions. So some water conservation at a glance. Our average residential water use is down 7% since 2002. And then our gross GCPD is 137 gallons, which is down 36% from 2002. And just to remind you all that our current water efficiency goal is to reduce our demand by 10%. We're, whichever way you look at it, whichever way you slice the pie, we're either very close or way above. So that's part of what we're looking at when we update our efficiency master plan this year, is reevaluating our goal and making sure that it reflects not only just market saturation and like natural consumption, but also active conservation. Okay, so here are some of the programs that we were able to accomplish in 2022. So I started in April of 2022, so a lot of this is due to Francie. All Q1 is Francie. So as you all know, Resource Central is like our workhorse of our water conservation programs. So we do all of the programs they offer. 2022 was the first year that we started our lawn replacement program. That was brand new. We didn't market it at all. And we sold out all of our money in like a month. And we had a wait list of 40 at the end of the year. So we really upped our budget for this year, but that was a huge success. We didn't know how that was gonna go. We were able to replace 11 lawns. We sold 185 discounted garden pin-boxes. We held 2 WaterWise yard seminars in a total of 167 participants. And then we had 174 slow-to-flow irrigation assessments, residential. Northern Water is our second biggest partner. They work on all of our multifamily and commercial properties. So they did 6 landscape consultations, 2 of which were City of Longmont properties, 5 irrigation audits on HOAs and large properties, and then 2 advanced irrigation audits, which would be like parks, golf courses, those types of things. So that's really great. And then Efficiency Works and PACE, those are our rebates programs. So Efficiency Works does our commercial and our residential rebate programs. And then Boulder County PACE, Partners for a Clean Environment. All of Longmont that's in Boulder County, we get to use them. So they help us out a lot too. They were able to go into 12 businesses in Boulder County, Longmont, Boulder County, and do upgrades and advising, which is great. And then our Efficiency Works, really working on that this year because it wasn't as successful as I was hoping that it would be. So we offered 3 store discounts. The Efficiency Works has an online store where folks can buy directly instead of having to apply for rebates. And then we had 39 rebates in total and 0 commercial properties. So we're working on that this year. But I would say we had a really successful year. Like I mentioned, 185 discounts, but we sold 393. So that tells us that even if we don't discount the gardens, our residents and our community members still want them. So that's good. We'll keep increasing those when we can. 11 participants in our lawn replacement program, over 7,000 square foot of turf grass removed. So that's exciting. This says 91 participants. So that's just one of them was 91 participants. The other number, 167 is correct. Over 2 seminars. And then Slow the Flow, we had 169 residential and 5 large properties. Yeah, this is just reiterating with a little bit more detail, especially in the Resource Central realm. And then this is just also highlighting that 0 commercial project that we're hoping to get at least 1 this year. We have a meeting next week, so fingers crossed we can get it on the books before the end of the year. The biggest highlights for us in 2022 was Growing Water Smart. We took a team of people from water resources, parks and open spaces, planning, which is really integral to learn more about the Growing Water Smart mindset. And I know you guys, I probably talked your ears off about this, but that's where we're going, is we're going to working on preemptive water conservation methods instead of retroactive. We're gonna really start working on our code. We're gonna look at all of our master plans and making sure that they're aligning, that they're using the same language, that they're using water efficiency before we develop. Education and outreach, I was able to attend several events, do a lot of engagement with the public, which I love, and that's really awesome. So that's always fun. And we revamped the website too, which was awesome. So it's a lot more user-friendly now and a lot easier to find resources that way. I also co-hosted 2 neighborhood leadership series meetings featuring irrigation efficiency and low impact
impact design practices. And then I worked with marketing and communications department to create a water communications plan. So every department who is doing water, so water conservation, we've got stormwater, water quality, and floodplain management, and me, and we created an official water communications plan so that we're not all doing the same thing. And then lastly, in the education and outreach, I was really busy. We developed a leak notification process with our AMR readers. That's still happening, but I started making that in 2022. And then partnerships and grants. Northern Water provided 2 advanced irrigation audits on Roosevelt and Garden Acres parks. And then they presented some recommendations on turf transitions in those spaces and some irrigation system efficiencies. So that's really great that we're able to do that on our park properties.
What's the process by which those recommendations become implemented?
For the parks?
Right, so in other words, like, they write a report, you read the report, then what, right? Then have you begin the process of communicating with our open space or with our?
Yeah, and actually those guys, our Parks Department was there on site with them while they were doing the audit and while they actually got all the reports and I had asked them for the reports. So they have that information. I think eventually as the state kind of comes out with more and more funding, and I'm going to talk about that actually right now, is the state, as you guys may have heard, had this huge grant opportunity for municipalities who have existing turf replacement plans to apply for some funding to do more turf replacement. And a lot of folks decided to kind of pad their existing turf replacement plans, but I decided that we were going to do a city project instead. And so in the future, as more and more of that funding becomes available, we'll have those reports and we'll say, okay, we already know what we're gonna do. Northern Water told us to do this, here's the money. And it will be like, as that's what I'm hoping to have as we're creating all of these things. So with our efficiency master plan update, we're doing a turf transition plan. I got a grant to do that. And that's another thing that I can't wait to have in our back pocket because what I'm running into is there's a lot of funding available, but we just don't really know how to spend it. And so I'm applying for these grants and then we're creating projects for that money, when really that's kind of like putting the horse before the cart, or the cart before the horse. So I wanted to, not do that, and I want to be really intentional and planful on projects moving forward. And so that's why we're doing all of these plans, so that when we do have money, we'll say, okay, well, Northern Water already gave us this assessment. You guys need money, so here you go. So that turf replacement or turf transition plan is in the works. They're looking at city-owned property, and then they're going to do a recommendations report based on kind of metrics or a matrix of priorities, so that when we have money, we can say, okay, well, this one is in an underserved neighborhood, and it might not save as much water, but it's a community asset and we'll do pollinator gardens and it's added to the ecosystem. Or if we're we just want to save water, then we'll do medians and stuff like that. We're doing a city code assessment right now. So we have a consulting agency come in. She's going to look at all of our code and our master plan and the variety of our master plans, our parks and open spaces and all those types of things. And just kind of highlight ways in which we can change language to be more water efficient. And then that will be a long process of me going to council and everybody, all of the plans who are being evaluated are in the loop. So we're all really excited about that one, especially our development code and our landscaping code. That's the one where she's going to really deep dive into. Still working on those AMR leak notifications. That's all I'll say about that. City turf transition. So as part of our Growing Water Smart group, we're working on a turf transition project at Kensington Park, and we got state funding to do this, and it's really exciting because there is an Art in Public Places mural in Kensington Park, and the Art in Public Places department was going to tear out the turf around the mural anyway and put in concrete, and we saw this as an opportunity to collaborate. And so we got state funding to have the turf removed, and we hired Northern Water, who has a Denver Botanic Garden designer on retainer. And the DBG designer is going to design a demonstration of sorts for the community members to kind of be able to walk through and have like better access to the mural, and then understand what they can do in their own lawns. So we're really excited about that. Community and neighborhood resources is involved, planning is involved, we're involved, parks obviously. So it's a really fun project I'm really excited about that is kind of showing the Grow and Water Smart mindset of this collaboration and this interdepartmental working of folks who usually don't get to work together. Like I would never work with Art in Public Places before, like Water Resources on Art in Public Places. Probably has never worked together. And now we get to work together on a project, so that's really exciting. And we're doing a ton of community outreach in that. We're throwing a huge event with food trucks and all kinds of things, and then we're implementing community input on how we design the garden. So we'll have garden specs and like ideas, and then we'll have like a dot matrix vote of what they want to see in the community. So very exciting. And then continuing with the education and outreach, I'd like to do, like I mentioned, at least one business project, commercial project with Efficiency Works, and then at least one or two frontline community projects. Like I have a project with Longmont Housing Authority and maybe funding some toilets for them, which would be really awesome. So that's my update. Yes.
What's the status of the water conservation native gardens at Sandstone with Northern Colorado and St. Vrain and Jim Crick?
Yes. I just got an email from him today, and the bids came in 40% over budget. So it's happening. We're ready to start construction. It's just a matter of getting the budgetary. But water conservation is able to kind of help out a little bit, not $40,000, but not 40%, $40,000 over budget. So it's happening.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes. You didn't want to talk about AMR leak detection. Is there a reason for that? Because sometimes the fact that leak detection exists is filtered into the public consciousness.
Yeah.
So whenever somebody has a leak and gets a big bill, they say, "Why didn't you tell us?"
Sure. The only reason I don't like talking about it is because it's banned my existence right now.
Well, that's
just because it's like a lot of manual work, and it's just like a lot of moving parts, right? So we got a federal grant for our AMI infrastructure, and part of that grant said that we will report how much water we estimate saving based on notifications. Part of that was that we were supposed to have our customer service portal up and running by now, and we don't. But that doesn't mean that we get out of that for our grant report. So it's fine.
You're simulating the website.
Sort of. I'm just doing a lot of like manual, like going into accounts and a lot of manual flags with Neptune, and then me estimating like what I think their leaks might look like. And then typing up letters and sending them via snail mail.
I'm sorry.
No, honestly, it's really great. I'm learning a ton, and it's helping me a lot.
Because I run an outreach program in a previous life, and I will say I think it's good to understand that there can be a lot of work with these programs with not a huge amount of return in terms of water. I think it is a decent customer service outreach, and there are times that you find really great leaks. By great, I mean bad. So it's a great thing.
It's good find.
Yes.
Great find. Portal leaks. And that's great. But then there's also a lot of times where you can accidentally send a customer on a wild goose chase. You can, just like Hope was saying, can be staff intensive. And so I think, based on the conversation we've had, getting that portal prioritized might be really worthwhile, because like the thing I'm most excited about is the code stuff and code assessment. Like That's the potential to really change stuff system-wide versus talking to one customer or mailing one customer thing saying, hey, go check your toilet.
Yeah.
So,
And
freeing up staff for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Portal.
I mean, honestly, like, I think it's a really good opportunity for me because I'm still new in this role and I'm new to a utility. And so for me to be able to look at the back end of what folks like water use looks like and what it's supposed to look like versus what it looks like when there's a leak is really valuable. It's not moving as quickly as I would like it to, but welcome to, government, I guess. And so it's all good, it's like, I'm learning a lot and I'm really excited for the portal. Yeah.
Any pressure, anyone on staff or council can apply to getting more portal.
Yeah, Marsha,
You can, okay.
Do we have something that can do 100% build out on the leak detection infrastructure?
Sort of. And that's kind of like another wrench in the process, right? Is like, we're like 85 to 90% of our community has AMR meters, but we can't get any more at the moment because of supply chain issues that we're still seeing from COVID. And then our gateway infrastructure is not complete yet. I haven't had any recent updates on where we are with the gateways, but the things that are collecting the data from the meters to send to our online thing.
So it's like we have meters that are like leak detection compatible,
Yeah,
but we have not yet integrated the leak detection into, like, be able to close the loop to return that information to either the utility or customers.
yeah, exactly. And the big missing piece there is that the AMR meters that exist right now, there's no way for the meter to connect with the customer directly. Because we're waiting for a customer service portal, or what is it, CSI, customer service infrastructure, and they're redoing all of it, and that's why we're waiting. So water, electric, and maybe something else.
So at some point in our future, we'll be able to log into some system and look at our daily water usage as a customer.
Exactly.
I remember that from previous.
Yes.
But of
Someday.
course, that's still out there.
Yeah. Do you know
We can
actually?
look at it from the utility side for a lot of them that have the AMR meters, but we don't have it for all of them yet, so.
Great.
Those gateway components are delayed too, they're hard to find.
Yeah, well, everything is just a mess.
But it's pretty, once you are back on the backside and you're looking, you can
Oh, yeah.
pretty easily tell when there's a leak or not leak. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a matter of, is the leak 0.1 gallon per hour?
Right.
And, or 100 gallons per hour, which
Yeah.
in that case, I've seen both of those, and it's, either way, both of those leaks are gonna initiate a flag in the system. And there's no way to filter out the size of the leak right now. So, at first I was like, oh my gosh, I really don't want to do this, but now that I'm like really into it, I don't mind it as much.
Good numbers though,
Thanks.
I was just kind of curious if you would know, Ken, comparing water usage in the month of May this year versus last year.
Very low.
Very low.
Good Mother Nature, I mean,
Well, and I can see that on folks,
I'll bet you can.
because I can see their year, and it's like half,
Yeah, that's
if not
somewhere.
less than half.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't turned my sprinklers on, so,
Through May, water reduction is the same as winter.
Yeah, it's gonna be like January, right, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions for Hope? Thanks for the presentation.
thank you.
All right. Can you bring up the slide of the items, maybe project listings?
Yes.
So, what I was gonna say, Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't we thinking of having we're gonna do a Union Reservoir overview?
We are, yeah. We haven't scheduled it in because I've got, we had the forest stewardship this month. We're gonna do the Colorado River in July. In fact, Colorado River Northern Water is scheduled to come for our July meeting to go over the Colorado River. And then we'll schedule that in the August, September. We'll talk more next
Yeah, I
month
haven't forgotten it.
Water Board, what you'd like to see.
Okay.
So, yeah, but we haven't forgotten. We
Oh,
will-
good, that's
we
all I
will-
want, that's all I want. Any comments or questions on, I don't know, Dan, have you ever seen this before? I doubt it.
Not
It's an
necessarily
overview of
seen
what's
it
coming
before,
together,
but
but-
I'm familiar with many of those projects.
Do you have a question? So on number 8, attainable housing, from what I understood anyway, at the most recent city council meeting, there were some developments about attainable housing and the nexus between that and water resources. I was just wondering if we should have a discussion about some of those, about what is presumably a change to our water policy about three acre foot per acre, and the reduction of that number in regards to attainable housing plots or something within
Yeah,
overall developments, and whether that
I
would come
think-
before our board.
So, you know, the cash in lieu is debt is incurred when property is annexed, but it's not payable until it's developed, am I right about that? And, so, Dr. Waters introduced a motion to consider, the idea that if the development includes a certain percentage of affordable or attainable housing, that the fee in lieu is reduced.
So the fee in lieu, not the 3 acre foot per acre
Right,
raw water policy.
yeah, I believe that's correct. He just wants to minimize the upfront costs.
Interesting. So is that something that would merit comment from water board?
Potentially, yes. I'm not sure that there is enough, I'm not sure that we have enough data to consider it yet. Have you had your staff look into it at all?
Yeah, we weren't aware of it. It was at the last council meeting,
Yeah,
on first reading, but
Right.
Water Resources was
yeah,
consulted on it, so we're
He
not
just,
sure what's going on.
it's been a thing, you know, but Dr. Waters has not liked the idea that we are raising the fee in lieu at all because he feels that it increases the cost of housing. And so he wants to be sure that we don't burden housing at the lower end too much with that. And, yeah, he introduced it, but I'm not sure how much analysis or how much. You know, there's gonna be a housing needs assessment, and maybe that will provide, information about what the impact that would be is. But I think planning is gonna have to go through and find out, or I don't know, is that you? I don't know what the process is. Somebody knows how much fee in lieu is pending, right?
Yeah, we know, we have a good handle on, you know, what property is annexed, what property is met the deficit, what property, how much, approximately how much deficit's in there. We, of course, don't know how much of that will be met by cash in lieu versus how much will be met by historical water.
Don't
Gross,
we know at annexation time how much that is gonna be?
well, we know how much the deficit is at annexation.
Yeah, oh, but they could have
Well,
acquired
then they
rights.
could come in and either pay cash in lieu or non-historical waters. Now, on a gross basis, we have an idea of how much non-historical water exists out there, and there's not a whole lot anymore. So we have a good idea. As time goes on, in fact, we're already experiencing this. We're seeing more cash in lieu than we did in the past because there's less non-historical water. And so we'd certainly be happy to bring that back and let Water Board see what those calculations look like. We have that on a GIS basis, and it's real easy to see what is where and what is happening. But again, in the short term, we don't know that ratio. In the long term, we pretty much can say, hey, there's this much non-historical out there, all the rest will be cash.
And the non-historical water is getting, I assume is getting more and more expensive as it gets rarer and rarer to be able to pick up, right?
It kind of tracks cash and lieu. You know, when we raise cash and lieu, then it goes up. It's always in the 60 to 90% of cash and lieu. It always has to trail cash and lieu because I would never want to bother to get any. I just write your check to all of them. So yeah, cash and lieu does go up, but we'll try. The non-historical track, cash and lieu. So yeah, we'll be happy to provide. We'll try to get us a little surprising too. So we'll try to see if we can get the information and maybe cast communication on the proposal to amend the raw water requirement policy around attainable housing that we be coming forward.
Do you have a comment?
Just, Councilman Martin, just what went to Tuesday night was an ordinance on first reading to modify the language in 1405, which is the raw water policy.
Yeah.
And it's really, it outlines a rebate program that was intended, I believe, to follow the affordable. It's a little unclear in the language. I think maybe what you were referring to before is that we have identified a certain amount of raw water that we currently hold that could be applied to affordable housing. So there's a pool, so that the city and the raw water portfolio is whole for development coming to the city. But I also understand that there's a lot more coming to the city council for attainable housing. But this will come up on second reading in a few weeks.
Yes.
And then this is kind of an interim condition.
That's right, and mostly to plug a loophole because an error was made, as I recall. So, yeah, there's more stuff in terms of, yeah, thanks for fixing the bill because
Well, just a little more information.
yeah.
And I believe that the intent is in the future to take this out of the raw water policy in the code, put it in attainable and affordable, which does outline all the rebate programs.
Okay. Any other comments on this?
Well, I'm not entirely certain, just to follow up on what I was saying before, I'm not entirely certain I followed all of that because there's a lot of municipal discussion there, of course.
And I'm not sure I got it.
And that's fine, and maybe none of us do, but I just want to make sure that, me speaking for myself at least, it'd be great to have an opportunity to comment on things that relate to water and water policy as a board. So there was a discussion there about kind of second reading, and I don't know exactly where in the overall process that falls. But for example, maybe before there's a vote and it becomes an official thing, maybe we have an opportunity to take a look at it.
Yeah, and I think that would happen again. This one that we just considered was kind of a patch to existing code that frankly I'd forgotten about, and I was jumping ahead to the larger reworking. And so the process is there's a first reading that allows the public to become aware of what the code change is going to be. Then there is a public hearing at the second reading before the council votes. Normally, on anything that was really a major policy change, the board would review the policy before it came to first reading. And like I said, this was kind of a quick patch.
But will we have an opportunity to have a look at it even before second reading if it happens at the next city council meeting, for example?
Well, You mean the patch, you're asking about it specifically?
Maybe, I'm not entirely certain what the patch is, but I'm also familiar with the fact that sometimes the patch becomes the rule, because that's just the way things work, I guess.
So the thing that went to first reading last council meeting will come up again for second reading in July. Because there are two council, 4th of July is a Tuesday and CML is this upcoming Tuesday, tomorrow. So there's 2 weeks without a council meeting. And then the next week, there'll be a council meeting, and that's when the second reading will be there. And you will have 3 to 5 business days for the to see what's on the council agenda. You can look back and see what was on the second reading, because nobody proposed any amendments. So you can comment at the public hearing, and you know, are free to do that like anybody else.
That meeting is before the next.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that would be as an individual, Tom.
Yeah, you can do that as
Yeah.
an individual.
Yeah, I suppose that's, I guess, you know, I feel like I feel like a comment from the board is more impactful than a comment from the public citizen.
That's certainly true.
And so I do feel like the board should have an opportunity to review and think about, consider things that have to do with water before they go and
Yes.
become policy.
Yeah, and I agree, and the rework, which is a major policy change, I'm sure that will happen. Again, this was really, they corrected an oversight with this, and that was why it was done quickly, and it didn't come before the board.
Okay. Let's go to item 11. Just informational items. I wanted to cover something with the board. Every time we have a position, a board position expires, the term expires, if mine did, by the way, then you bring on another member or reappoint the existing member. But we have an officer, our vice chair, board member left. So we have an opening for the vice chair, and we should do elections with the annual coming of new members coming in. So I think the bylaws say that should be done in August. Is that, Ken?
That's correct, yeah, around 2017, the board amended their bylaws to set the August meeting. It was partially because all boards used to be January 1st to December 31st, but then that really made the selection process jammed up once a year, so it was split. Half the boards go in December and half the boards go in summer. Water board's one of them that comes in the summer. As I remember right, there was a little concern that we'd have all the board selection process done in time for an annual meeting in July, so it was changed to August. So yeah, right now the board's, I'll call it the board's year, at least especially in terms of chair and vice chair, is August through July. So yeah, we don't have a.
What my point is, we don't have a vice chair, but rather than deal with the vice chair before the annual thing, my suggestion is when we get to August meeting, we have an election of chair and vice chair to fill that out, clean it up, and if somebody's got some objections, I propose we do that. So that's all I wanted to say. As far as deciding those officers, we'll just use the August meeting to do that. So. Other than that, we saw the items scheduled for future board meetings. Well, cash and lieu, Dan asked a question that shows that cash and lieu is March, June, September, December. That's a quarterly discussion. And we discuss future water board agendas. Any other comments, Ken, as far as what might be coming up for us?
I don't have any right now.
Before we close, anybody have any other comments at all? Okay, meeting adjourned.